Thank you to all my channel members, including my fan appreciation level members and my contributor level members, for helping support the YouTube channel.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my ranking of the Star Wars Old Republic era books. I had a channel member who requested this video a little while back, and I said that once I completed all of the Old Republic era books, that I would make sure to schedule this for them. So this is going out for you. Thank you for suggesting that idea. If you want to become a channel member, just hit the join button on the channel, or just go directly to the channel's main page. You should be able to find the information there. But there are 11 books that I'm going to rank in this video. Now, the actual Old Republic era only has 10, but there is the Dawn of the Jedi era, which is like its own separate thing and only has one book. And I felt I can't rank that book like by itself as its own. It's the best and worst of that era. But I'm going to include it in the Old Republic era just so that it fits kind of here. But there are 11 books I'm going to talk about. Now, I'm going to admit, some of these books are fresh on my mind because I've read them in the last year or so. And some of these books I read like 6 or 7 years ago, and I haven't reread recently. So I admit there's a bit of fuzziness on especially 3 of the books I'm going to talk about. 3 of the books here, I really had to struggle to remember them, which doesn't necessarily bode great for them, but it also didn't bode terribly. It doesn't mean I hated the book or really disliked. I have on here 3 books I disliked, 3 books I thought were okay. I have 3 books that I thought were good, and then I have 2 books that I thought were great. So why don't I begin with number 11, the bottom of the list. The one I disliked the most is probably going to be the one that gets me in the most trouble, and that is Revan. This is one of the very few Star Wars books that made me angry after finishing it. If you've read the book, you probably know exactly why. I am not a video game person, but I picked this book up because I had played through, this was years ago, I'd played through part of the Knights of the Old Republic video game, and my brother-in-law talked about all the Star Wars books at the time, and so I was like, well, I know the character of Revan, I know what basically happens to him in the game. I hadn't finished the game at the time, I have since, but I hadn't finished the game at the time, but I knew what happened to Revan in the book, or in the game, so I was like, I'll read the book about Revan, and the first half of this book's okay. I was kind of enjoying it. It was kind of a fun ride. The second half of this book is so darn frustrating. I just was so angry with it. I did not like the direction Drew Karpyshyn went. I know that he probably had it was a bit hemmed in by what he could and couldn't do with it, and also had to match up with some video game stuff and what was coming in the future. Still, it was so frustratingly written, and if the book had been more like the first half, I would have really enjoyed it, but just that second half just made me so angry. And you do not want to anger your audience unless you have a really good way of doing it. Like, very rarely making your audience angry is a good thing. It was not a good thing here. So that is why this is number 11. My number 10 technically isn't in the Old Republic era, but I'm throwing it in, and that's Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void. Technically, it's not really in the it's its own thing, but just go with me on it. So this book is set tens of thousands. I think it's like 25,000 years before the events of the main Star Wars story, and I was hoping this book was going to be about the dawn of the Jedi. And it really isn't about that. It's just a Jedi early on in the Jedi Order who goes on a mission and is trying to stop her brother from doing a bunch of these dark side type stuff. And none of the book worked. I didn't have a visceral reaction like I did with Revan. Like, Revan made me angry. This book I just didn't care for. I just didn't like it. So this book, just none of it worked. None of it was like, it made me angry, but none of it made me happy. So this book, I just thought that the mission was bland, the characters were bland, none of it worked. This was the most recent read I had, but just none of it worked. All right, position number 9 is going to be the third book in the Darth Bane trilogy, Dynasty of Evil. This book, I did not love the ending again. I think that True Carpathian really fumbled the ending of this book. I felt that he also just fumbled the overall style. I felt like he had something better going on in the first two books, and I much more respect what he did in the first two. But this one, it felt like we have a third book in the trilogy. We need to tie up the stuff with Xana. So let's go ahead and do that. And I just thought, it just didn't work as a book. You know, the ending fight sequence between Xana and Bane is pretty awesome. Other than that, this didn't really care for the book. I thought it's better. It's better than Dawn of the Jedi. It's better than that one, at least. But yeah. So now we've moved on from the ones I disliked, and now we're moving on to the books that I don't remember because it's been so long and they didn't leave that much of an impression on me. And ironically, all three of these are tie-ins for the video game. So I'm going to talk about the ones that I remember the least to the most. So starting with Deceived by Paul S. Kemp. And I have to apologize, my copy's falling apart. I read this about 6 or 7 years ago. I don't have an exact date for when I read it, but I remember the stuff about Malgus and him working with someone to get in to the Jedi Temple, and I remember reading the Jedi perspective a little bit, but really this book was just so forgettable to me. It just didn't stick in my mind. And so, unfortunately, this one was one of the forgettable ones. We also have Drew Karpyshyn's Annihilation, which the character Theron Shan. And I actually really remember a little bit more of this one because I remember really liking the character. I really liked the opening of this book, and I really liked seeing how he came to grips with, even though he came from a family of Force users, a heritage of Force users, he himself was not a Force user. And I just remember the quandaries that he would have to deal with, him deciding, you know what, I just got to move on from that. That stuff I found kind of really fun in this book. But the actual plot of the book, don't really remember, unfortunately. So that's why this is number 7. Number 6, I remember a little bit more, and that's Fatal Alliance by Sean Williams. I remember the team-up aspect of this book pretty well, and I did enjoy that, and I liked the meeting of having the artifacts and them calling the different kinds of groups together, the Republic, the Empire, the Jedi, the Sith, they're getting them all together, basically, because they're like, hey, we found this stuff. And I do remember really finding the team-up stuff in this book really fascinating, because that's something that you don't see often in Star Wars, is the good guys having to work with the bad guys. And so that one, I don't remember a ton of it, but I thought it was okay, okay enough that it didn't bother me. Although that cover is a striking cover there. Oh, striking. So that is my number 7. Yeah, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Or is this 6? 10. Or 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. This is 6, sorry. All right, let's move on to my top 5 for the Old Republic. And now we're getting into the ones that I think are actually pretty good. And let's start with the second Darth Bane book, Rule of Two. This is the second Darth Bane book, much better than the third book. I think it's a step down from the first book, but the way you explore the dark side in this book is so intriguing. I loved the stuff with Valorum in this book. An older, not that Valorum from the movies, but a previous Valorum. And you also have the Jedi who is trying to protect Valorum, and you have the battles that he's going on, him trying to convince the Jedi to go after Bane, them thinking that the Sith are finally gone, Xana infiltrating the Jedi Temple, all of that I loved in this book. But the stuff with Bane himself in the second half of this book, and even in the middle of the book, where he's going his dark side stuff, working with getting the armor from the stuff, I didn't love that part of the book. I thought that Xana's storyline was much more interesting than Bane's. So yeah, that's that book, number 5. Number 4 is a short story collection by John Jackson Miller titled Lost Tribe of the Sith. This is a tie-in to the Fate of the Jedi series. This is a book set during the Old Republic when this group of Sith were in this ship. The ship crash lands on the planet, and the Sith basically have to form their own society on the planet. And you're seeing the precursor for the stuff in Fate of the Jedi, but you're also, it's just, even if you didn't have the Fate of the Jedi stuff, it's really fascinating. There's a twist in this book where they discover there's other people here. Oh, it's a great twist. It's a great twist. And all of the short stories are kind of linked together, and it's its own individual short story, but it kind of is telling this overarching theme. And this was just a really fun collection. So that's why it's my number 4. My number 3, one I really enjoyed, is one that a lot of people did not enjoy, but I did, and that is Knight Errant by John Jackson Miller again. John Jackson Miller did a tremendous job with this book. The way he explores what makes the Jedi good, he explores how there are different factions of Sith, and how he, in this book, utilized the different factions of Sith to represent the different factions of communism, I thought was just really fascinating. And it's not something a lot of people picked up on, but when you know that's what he was doing, it becomes so intriguing. And I really loved all of that stuff in this book. And I like Kira Holt. I like a character who's purely good for purely good reasons, and I loved that about her in this book. And I think it is just I think it's a tremendous book compared to some of the others. It's towards the bottom of John Jackson Miller's pile. This and Lost Tribe, I think, are two of his weakest books. That tells you how amazing he is of an author for me. That this is one of his weaker books, and I still loved it. But we're in the great books section. My top 2 are the great books of the Old Republic era. And we're going to start with my number 2, which is Darth Bane, Path of Destruction. This book I for years didn't love, and I reread it about a year ago, and my respect for this book increased. I still don't love the process of reading such dark, evil, dark side stuff. I just don't care about that. I much rather want to read from the Jedi perspective and the light and read a political story. And this book has political stuff in it, but this book is so dark. But it's also so brilliantly written. I recognize the brilliance of this book, even if I don't love reading it. I recognize what it did for Star Wars, what it did for a lot of EU readers, what it did for the era. I recognize so much about how awesome this book is, while saying a lot of it doesn't work for me. But still, this is a tremendously written book, and for sure it's the best in the trilogy. And really, honestly, you could just read this book by itself, and it would be worth it. So what's my number 1? Some of you might, this next book I think for a lot of people was forgettable, but for me was so good. And that is Star Wars Red Harvest. I know so many people don't like zombies in Star Wars. I get it. I get that a lot of people don't like zombies. I think that this book is delightful. It's also dark, which is like Darth Bane, but in a different way. Whereas Darth Bane is exploring these deep machinations and evil thoughts of the characters. From here, a lot of it is from kind of good guys' perspectives, or at least not as bad guys. And the whole concept of you basically this being a horror novel, and you have basically a final girl trying to survive, this final girl Jedi who she and this plant are trying to survive this zombie apocalypse on this Sith planet. And you see the Sith one by one turning to zombies and dying. And you see her trying to stop the guy who created the zombies and all this stuff. And you see her brother trying to get to the planet to rescue her. It's a delightful book to me. It's not even Joe Scriber's best book. I think his best book is the Darth Maul Lockdown. But this book is still tremendous, and it's my favorite book of the Old Republic era. I know just like almost every single other reader, it's gonna be Path of Destruction. I recognize the greatness of the book, but for me, this book was just such a delight to read, and it's one of those I could just, I'm not a rereader, but if it ever got to the point where I'm just looking for something for an afternoon just to fly through, it's a really short book. It's like 250 pages, so it's one of those I would just sit for an afternoon, 2 or 3 hours, and just reread and have a blast. I think it's a great book. So that is my ranking of the Old Republic era of Star Wars books. 11 books ranked. I know that's going to be controversial. I know I put some of the John Jackson Miller ones high and other people don't like that. I know I put some of the True Carpathian stuff low and people don't like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. How would you rank the Old Republic books? And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.